I was standing in my driveway at 6:30 in the morning, coffee in hand, when I noticed something that made my blood pressure spike before I'd even had my first sip. There was a bright yellow construction vehicle parked across what had been, for the past 8 years, my primary access route to the back section of my property in Henderson, Nevada. My name is Zachary Owens, and I own a 4-acre parcel that borders the Spring Valley HOA community. When I purchased this land back in 2017, I made absolutely certain that I had a legal easement running through a small strip of HOA property. This easement was my only practical way to access the rear 2 acres where I kept my workshop, stored equipment, and maintained a small orchard I'd planted 3 years ago. The easement was recorded in the county records, signed off by the previous HOA board, and clearly marked on my property survey. Now there were 2 men in hard hats unloading sections of wrought iron fencing from a truck. I set my coffee down on the hood of my truck and walked over. The morning air was already warming up, promising another scorching Nevada day. My work boots crunched on the gravel as I approached the workers. "Morning," I called out. "Can I ask what you're doing here?" The older of the 2 men, probably in his 50s with a weathered face that spoke of decades working outdoors, glanced up from the gate section he was examining. "Installing a security gate. HOA ordered it." "This is an easement," I said, keeping my voice level despite the alarm bells going off in my head. "I have legal access rights here." The man shrugged. "Don't know anything about that. We just install what we're told to install." "You'll have to take it up with the HOA." The younger worker was already mixing concrete in a portable mixer. They were planning to set posts. This wasn't some temporary barrier. They were building a permanent structure across my only practical access route. "Hold on," I said, pulling out my phone. "Don't pour that concrete yet. There's clearly been a mistake." The older worker pulled a crumpled work order from his back pocket. "Says right here, install security gate at the north access point to prevent unauthorized vehicle access to HOA grounds. We got our permits and everything." "That north access point is my legal easement," I explained, trying to remain calm. "I have documentation. Let me contact the HOA and sort this out before you go any further." He checked his watch. "Look, buddy, we got 3 jobs today. If you got an issue, call the HOA office. They open at 9. We're getting paid to install this gate, and that's what we're doing." I pulled up the HOA office number on my phone, knowing full well they wouldn't be open for another 2.5 hours. I called anyway and got the expected voicemail. I left a message explaining the situation and stating clearly that the construction needed to stop immediately due to my easement rights. "I left a message," I told the workers. "But I'm telling you right now, this is going to be a legal problem. You're blocking a recorded easement." The older guy actually looked a bit concerned now. "You got proof of this easement in my house. Give me 5 minutes. I jogged back to my property and into my home office, where I kept all my important documents in a filing cabinet. I grabbed the folder containing my property survey, the easement agreement, and the deed that specifically mentioned the easement rights. I also grabbed my tablet so I could pull up the county recorder's office website if needed. When I returned, the younger worker had already dug holes for 2 posts. My frustration was mounting. "Here," I said, showing them the survey map with the easement clearly highlighted in yellow. "This is a legal document recorded with Clark County. See this strip? That's a 20-foot wide easement for vehicle and pedestrian access. You're putting a gate right in the middle of it." The older worker studied the document, his frown deepening. He pulled out his phone and made a call. From what I could hear, he was talking to his boss at the installation company. After a few minutes, he hung up. My boss says we have to install it. The HOA paid for the permit and the installation. He says any legal issues are between you and the HOA. We're just contractors doing our job. Your job is about to get your company sued, I said. I'm documenting this. I took photos of the work order, the construction vehicle, the holes they dug, and the gate sections. The worker shrugged again. It was clear they were going to proceed no matter what I said. I called my real estate attorney, Marcus Freeman, whose number I kept handy for exactly these kinds of situations. Being a property owner in Nevada, I'd learned it paid to have a good lawyer on speed dial. The call went to voicemail. It was not even 7 in the morning on a Tuesday. I left an urgent message. For the next hour, I watched helplessly as these two workers installed posts, mixed and poured concrete, and began assembling a decorative iron gate complete with an electronic lock system. The gate was actually quite nice, probably cost the HOA $15,000 or more. It was also completely illegal. At 8:15, I called the HOA office again. Still voicemail. I left another message, this one more forceful. At 8:30, I tried again. Finally, at 9:05, someone answered. Spring Valley HOA, this is Patricia speaking. Hi Patricia, this is Zachary Owens. I've left 2 messages this morning about an emergency situation. There's a gate being installed across my legal easement right now. Oh yes, Mr. Owens. Let me transfer you to our board president, Sharon. Classic Karen name. I thought as hold music played. Sharon Mitchell had been the HOA president for the past 2 years, and in that time, she developed a reputation as someone who ruled the HOA with an iron fist. I'd had minimal dealings with her before, as my property was technically outside the HOA boundaries, but I'd heard stories from neighbors. This is Sharon Mitchell. Her voice was sharp and businesslike. Miss Mitchell, this is Zachary Owens. I own the property adjacent to your HOA's north boundary. There's a construction crew installing a gate across my legal easement right now. This easement is recorded with the county and gives me vehicle access rights. This gate needs to be removed immediately. Mr. Owens, that gate is being installed to prevent people like you from using HOA property as a shortcut. We've had numerous complaints from residents about non-residents driving through our community. I'm not driving through your community. I'm using a legal easement that crosses a small strip of HOA property to access the back portion of my own land. This easement was established before your HOA even existed and is part of the recorded plat. I'm looking at our property maps right now, Mr. Owens, and I see no such easement. This was getting absurd. Then your maps are wrong. The easement is recorded with Clark County Recorder's Office. Book 2847, page 193. It's also clearly shown on my property survey and mentioned specifically in my deed. Well, I don't have access to that information right now. You'll need to submit a written request to the board, and we'll review it at our next monthly meeting. Your next meeting is when? 3 weeks from Thursday. That's completely unacceptable. Your crew is cementing posts into the ground right now. Once that concrete sets, you'll have permanently blocked my legal access. I need this stopped immediately. Mr. Owens, I don't appreciate your tone. The board made a decision to improve security in our community. If you believe you have some sort of legal right, you're welcome to present that evidence to the board following proper procedures. But I'm not going to stop a $15,000 installation project based on a phone call. Sharon, I'm trying to handle this professionally. But what you're doing is illegal. You're blocking a recorded easement. If that gate gets completed, I'll have no choice but to take legal action. You do what you need to do, Mr. Owens. We're confident in our rights to control access to our property. Have a good day. She hung up. I stood there, phone in hand, watching the workers attach the gate panels to the posts. The concrete was already hardening in the Nevada heat. My easement, my legal right of access that I'd specifically verified before purchasing this property, was being blocked. My attorney called back at 9:30. I explained the situation while walking him through everything via a video call so he could see the construction in progress. "Zach, they can't do this," Marcus said. "That easement is clear as day, but stopping them right now is tricky. I can file for an emergency injunction, but that takes time. Even if I rush it, we're looking at a few days minimum, possibly a week. What are my options, legally?" "You can sue for interference with your easement rights, demand they remove the gate, and seek damages for your losses while access is blocked. But that's a court process. Months, potentially. What about less legally?" There was a pause. "I'm your attorney, so I have to advise you to go through proper legal channels. That said, if someone built something on your recorded easement, you potentially have the right to remove the obstruction yourself. But Zach, that could get messy. The HOA could claim vandalism, destruction of property, all sorts of things. Even though they're the ones who built something on my easement, in the eyes of the law, yes, they could make that argument. And then it becomes a legal battle anyway, just with potential criminal charges added to the mix. I'm strongly advising you to let me handle this through official channels." I thanked Marcus and hung up. The gate was now fully installed. The workers were cleaning up, loading their tools back into the truck. The older worker came over to me. "All set. Here's your copy of the completion certificate." He handed me a paper. "This gate is blocking my legal easement," I said one more time. "Like I said, that's between you and the HOA. Have a good one." They drove away, leaving behind a beautiful wrought iron gate with an electronic keypad lock. A gate that prevented me from accessing 2 acres of my own property that contained thousands of dollars worth of equipment, tools, and trees I needed to maintain. I walked up to the gate and tested it. Solid. Well built. The posts were set in at least 3 feet of concrete. The gate itself was heavy-duty steel, probably weighed several hundred pounds. This wasn't coming down easily. I looked at my watch. It was almost 10. I had a decision to make. The alternative route to my back acreage involved driving 15 miles around on public roads, then accessing through a rough desert trail that connected to my eastern property line. That route was only passable with a 4-wheel drive vehicle and took nearly 45 minutes one way. The whole point of having the easement was to provide quick, reasonable access. I could drive through the easement and reach my workshop in about 3 minutes. I had irrigation systems back there that needed monitoring. I had solar panels that required maintenance. I had equipment worth over $50,000, and now I couldn't easily access any of it. I thought about Marcus's advice. Go through legal channels, file the injunction, wait for the courts. But how long would that take? And in the meantime, what if something broke? What if there was a fire? What if someone vandalized my property because they realized I couldn't easily access it? The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I hadn't done anything wrong. I'd purchased property with a legal easement. I'd verified that easement before buying. I'd paid for that easement as part of my property value. And now some power-hungry HOA president was taking it away because she either didn't understand property law or didn't care. I made my decision. I went back to my workshop on the front part of my property where I could still access and evaluated what I'd need. The gate posts were set in concrete, but the gate itself was attached with heavy-duty hinges and a lock mechanism. I could potentially remove just the gate panel, leaving the posts, which would still allow me access. But looking at it more carefully, I realized the posts themselves narrowed the easement. Even without the gate, the posts reduced the 20-foot easement to about 12 feet. That was tight for some of the equipment I needed to move through there. I decided the whole thing needed to come out. Posts and all. This wasn't going to be quick or easy, but I had the tools and the know-how. I owned a small excavator that I used for property maintenance. It was normally kept in my back acreage, but I'd recently brought it forward for some work on my driveway. Lucky timing. I spent the next hour preparing. I attached my chain winch to my heavy-duty pickup truck. I got my excavator running and moved it into position. I set up my camera on a tripod to document everything I was doing, and I called Marcus. "I'm removing the gate," I told him. "Zach, I strongly advise against this." "Noted, I'm doing it anyway. I'm documenting everything. I have my easement papers here. I'm going to film the whole thing and narrate exactly what I'm doing and why. If the HOA wants to press charges, let them. They're the ones who broke the law first." Marcus sighed. "If you're going to do this, do it right. Make sure your documentation clearly shows the easement. Show the gate blocking it. Explain calmly and clearly why you're removing it. Don't damage anything more than necessary. And Zach, call me the second you're done or if anyone shows up." "Will do." I started the camera recording and positioned it to capture the whole scene. Then I stood in frame and began narrating. Today is Tuesday, June 17th, 2025. The time is 11:45 a.m. My name is Zachary Owens, and I am the owner of the property located at 8847 Desert Springs Road, Henderson, Nevada. This morning, I discovered that the Spring Valley HOA had installed a gate across my legal easement without my knowledge or permission. This easement is recorded with Clark County in Book 2847, page 193. I am now holding my property survey which clearly shows this easement. I held the survey up to the camera, pointing out the highlighted easement area. I contacted the HOA immediately and spoke with Board President Sharon Mitchell. She refused to remove the gate and told me I would need to wait 3 weeks for a board meeting to address this issue. In the meantime, this gate blocks my only practical access to 2 acres of my property. I have contacted my attorney, Marcus Freeman, who confirms this gate is illegally blocking my easement. I am now exercising my right to remove this obstruction from my easement. I set the paperwork down where it was visible in the frame and got to work. First, I tried the simple approach. I used bolt cutters on the lock mechanism. The lock was expensive and well made, but bolt cutters don't care about price tags. The lock gave way after some effort. With the lock removed, I could swing the gate open, but that didn't solve the problem of the posts. I used the excavator to carefully dig around the first post. The concrete footing was substantial, probably 4 feet deep. This was going to take a while. I was about an hour into the excavation when a white Mercedes SUV came tearing up the road. I'd been expecting this. The HOA probably had cameras or someone had seen me and called it in. Sharon Mitchell climbed out of the Mercedes, and she looked exactly like I'd imagined. Mid-50s, short blonde hair styled in that particular way that screamed, "I want to speak to the manager," wearing expensive athletic wear despite probably not having exercised in years. "What do you think you're doing?" she shouted, marching toward me. I stopped the excavator and climbed down, making sure to stay in frame of my camera. "Removing an illegal obstruction from my easement," I said calmly. "That is HOA property. You're vandalizing our security gate. This gate is built across my recorded easement. I have the legal right to access this easement. You are blocking my access, so I'm removing the blockage. I'm calling the police." She had her phone out already. "Go ahead. I'd actually appreciate having an officer here to document this situation. That seemed to surprise her. She'd probably expected me to panic at the threat of police involvement. You're destroying $15,000 worth of property. You built $15,000 worth of property on my legal easement without permission. That was your choice and your mistake. Sharon's face was turning red. The board will sue you for every penny this costs. Looking forward to it. My attorney will countersue for interference with easement rights and will also be seeking damages for any losses I incur while you've been blocking my access, plus legal fees. This gate has been blocking my access for about 6 hours now. Let's see what the judge thinks about that. She started speaking rapidly into her phone, presumably to 911. I continued working on the post while she made her call. The concrete was breaking up nicely, and the excavator was doing most of the heavy lifting. 2 other cars arrived before the police did. A couple of HOA board members, I assumed. One was a man in his 60s wearing golf clothes, the other a woman in her 40s in business attire. They joined Sharon in a heated discussion, occasionally throwing angry looks my way. I ignored them and kept working. The first post was almost free. The Henderson police arrived about 20 minutes later. 2 officers, one older and one younger, approached cautiously. I immediately stopped working and walked over to meet them, hands visible. Officers, I'm Zachary Owens. I own this property here. I gestured to my land. Sharon rushed over. Officers, this man is vandalizing our security gate. He's destroyed the lock and he's tearing out the posts. I want him arrested for destruction of property. The older officer, whose name tag read Martinez, held up a hand. Let's everybody slow down, sir. Can you explain what's going on here? Certainly. This morning, I discovered the HOA had installed this gate across my legal easement without my knowledge or permission. This easement is recorded with Clark County and gives me vehicle access rights. The gate was blocking my only practical access to 2 acres of my property. I contacted the HOA. They refused to remove it, so I'm removing it myself. He's lying, Sharon interjected. There's no easement. He's just some neighbor who thinks he can use our property as a shortcut. Madam, please let him finish, Officer Martinez said. He turned back to me. You say you have documentation of this easement? Yes, sir. Right here. I walked over to where I'd set up my documents and brought them to the officer. This is my property survey, clearly showing the easement. This is the recorded easement agreement filed with the county. And this is my deed, which specifically mentions the easement rights. Officer Martinez studied the documents carefully. His younger partner came over to look as well. This looks legitimate, Martinez said. The easement is clearly marked. He looked at Sharon. Madam, did the HOA verify whether there were any easements before installing this gate? We don't recognize any easement. He probably forged those documents. The younger officer spoke up. Madam, these are recorded county documents. You can't forge those. They're in the county system. Sharon's face was getting redder. Well, we have the right to control access to our property. Not if there's a legal easement, Officer Martinez said. He looked at the gate, then at me. Sir, while I understand your frustration, you probably should have gone through legal channels to resolve this. I did try, officer. I called the HOA multiple times this morning. I spoke directly with Miss Mitchell here. She told me I'd have to wait 3 weeks for a board meeting and refused to stop the installation. This gate blocks my access to my property, where I have equipment, irrigation systems, and crops that need maintenance. I couldn't wait 3 weeks for them to possibly consider acknowledging my legal rights. Officer Martinez nodded slowly. I see the dilemma. He turned to Sharon. "Madam, if this easement is legally recorded, the HOA can't block it. That's a civil matter, property rights issue. He has the right to access his easement. So you're not going to arrest him. For what? Removing an obstruction from his own easement. No, madam. This is a civil dispute between property owners. You'll need to resolve it in court or work it out between yourselves. This is ridiculous. He's destroying our property. Madam, if that gate is built on his easement, it's not really your property to build on. Again, this is a civil matter. I'd suggest you both contact your attorneys and resolve this properly." Sharon looked like she might explode. The other two board members were talking urgently with her, but she kept shaking them off. "We're going to sue you for everything you've got," she said to me. "You're welcome to try," I replied. The officers stayed for a few more minutes, taking down information and incident numbers, but they made it clear this wasn't a criminal matter. Once they left, Sharon and her board members retreated to their cars, still throwing venomous looks my way. I went back to work. By 3 in the afternoon, I had both posts removed and the gate completely dismantled. I loaded the posts, gate, and hardware onto my truck and drove it all to the HOA's main office, where I unloaded everything in their parking lot. I even left a note. "Your gate, removed from my easement. Please don't block it again." When I got home, there was already a letter taped to my door. It was from the HOA's attorney demanding I pay for the gate and threatening legal action. I scanned it and emailed it to Marcus. He called me 10 minutes later, laughing. "Zach, this is the most poorly written demand letter I've seen in years. They don't have a leg to stand on. They built on your easement. That's black and white property law. I'll respond to this, but I don't think it's going anywhere." "What about their threat to sue?" "Let them. We'll countersue immediately. And honestly, I think we have a good case for monetary damages. They did block your access for several hours. If you can document any losses or inconveniences, we can include those in our claim." Over the next few days, things escalated in the way only HOA disputes can. Sharon apparently went on a mission to paint me as some kind of criminal neighbor. She posted in the HOA's private Facebook group about me, calling me a vandal and a bully. Several residents who didn't know the full story started posting negative comments about me. A friend who lived in the HOA sent me screenshots of everything. Some of the comments were pretty vicious, calling for criminal charges and claiming I'd threatened Sharon. None of it was true, but truth doesn't always matter in the court of public opinion. I decided to get ahead of the narrative. I posted my video on YouTube with a clear, factual title, "Removing Illegal Gate from My Recorded Easement." I included timestamps and links to the county recorder's office where anyone could verify my easement documents. I also included the part where the police arrived and explained it was a civil matter, not criminal. The video got more attention than I expected. Within a few days, it had several thousand views. Local news started picking it up. Property rights advocates shared it. And suddenly, the HOA was getting negative attention instead of me. A week after the gate incident, I received a call from a producer at KSNV, the local NBC affiliate. They wanted to do a story about HOA overreach and property rights. I agreed to an interview. The segment aired 3 days later. They did a great job presenting the facts, showing my easement documents, interviewing a local property attorney who confirmed my rights, and even getting a comment from Sharon, where she dug herself deeper by insisting the HOA had done nothing wrong. After the news segment aired, things started shifting. Several HOA board members reached out to me privately, apologizing and explaining they hadn't been fully informed about the easement issue. Apparently, Sharon had pushed through the gate installation without properly researching the property boundaries or easements. 2 weeks after the incident, I received a call from a board member named Richard Chen. "Mr. Owens, I want to apologize on behalf of the board. Well, most of the board. Sharon is being difficult, but several of us have reviewed the situation and your documentation. You're absolutely right about the easement. The gate installation was a mistake. I appreciate you saying that. We're actually in the process of removing Sharon as board president. There's going to be a special election. She's made several decisions without proper board approval, and this gate situation was the last straw. I want to assure you that the new board will respect your easement rights." That's good to hear. "We'd also like to settle this matter without going to court. Your attorney sent us a demand letter for damages. We're prepared to offer a settlement. Would you be willing to discuss terms?" I told Richard I'd discuss it with my attorney and get back to him. Marcus was pleased with this development. "This is exactly what we wanted. They're acknowledging wrongdoing and offering to settle. Let me negotiate with them. I'll make sure we get fair compensation for your time, stress, and any actual losses." The settlement negotiations took about 2 weeks. The HOA ended up paying me $12,000, which covered my legal fees, some estimated crop losses from not being able to easily access my irrigation systems, and compensation for my time and stress dealing with the situation. They also agreed in writing to permanently recognize my easement, maintain clear access, and never obstruct it again. The settlement included a clause that if they ever violated the easement again, they'd pay automatic penalties plus legal fees. Sharon Mitchell resigned as HOA president a week before the settlement was finalized. Rumor had it she was also facing questions about other financial decisions she'd made without board approval. I never learned the full details, but I heard through the grapevine that the HOA was considering legal action against her for exceeding her authority. Richard Chen became the new board president. One of his first acts was to send a formal letter to all residents explaining the easement situation and apologizing for the confusion. He also implemented new procedures requiring board votes for any construction projects and proper legal review of property boundaries. I thought everything was done, but 3 months later, I got a call from the Clark County District Attorney's office. A detective wanted to meet with me about Sharon Mitchell. Detective Sarah Rodriguez came to my property on a Thursday afternoon. She was professional and thorough, asking detailed questions about the gate incident and my interactions with Sharon. "We're investigating Miss Mitchell for potential embezzlement and fraud related to her time as HOA president," Detective Rodriguez explained. "The gate incident is part of a larger pattern. We've discovered she approved multiple contracts with vendors, including that gate installation, where she received kickbacks. The company that installed your gate gave her $3,000 in cash, which she didn't disclose to the board. So she had a financial incentive to approve the installation, even though it was illegal." Exactly. "We've found similar arrangements with a landscaping company and a pool maintenance contractor. She was basically running a kickback scheme through HOA contracts. The total amount we're looking at is over $80,000. I gave Detective Rodriguez copies of all my documentation, including my video footage of the gate installation and removal, and my recordings of phone calls with Sharon. I also provided the name of the installation company and the workers who'd installed the gate. The investigation took several months. During that time, I learned more about Sharon's schemes. She'd been systematically approving inflated contracts with certain vendors, who would then kick back a percentage to her in cash. The gate installation was particularly egregious because she knew about my easement but approved the project anyway because the installation company was one of her kickback partners. In January of 2026, Sharon Mitchell was arrested and charged with embezzlement, fraud, and theft. The charges carried serious penalties because she'd stolen from what legally amounted to a nonprofit organization. The local news covered the arrest extensively. My gate video resurfaced and got shared widely again. I did another interview explaining how the gate incident had been my first clue that something wasn't right with Sharon's management of the HOA. Sharon's trial was scheduled for April, but she accepted a plea deal in March. She pleaded guilty to multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. The judge sentenced her to 3 years in prison and ordered her to pay full restitution to the HOA, which totaled $93,000 including interest and penalties. The sentencing hearing was open to the public. I attended, sitting in the back of the courtroom. Sharon looked defeated as the judge read her sentence. When given the opportunity to speak, she apologized but also tried to minimize her actions, claiming she'd been under financial stress. The judge wasn't sympathetic. "Miss Mitchell, you held a position of trust within your community. You systematically abused that trust for personal financial gain. Your actions hurt your neighbors and violated the law. The sentence reflects the serious nature of your crimes." As she was led away by bailiffs, Sharon glanced back at the courtroom. For a moment, her eyes met mine. I didn't feel satisfaction or vindication, just a sense that justice had been served. After the sentencing, Richard Chen approached me outside the courthouse. "Thank you for standing up to her," he said. "If you hadn't fought back on that gate issue, we might never have uncovered what she was doing." The gate incident made several board members start asking questions, which led to the financial audit that exposed everything. "I was just protecting my property rights," I said. "But I'm glad it helped. The HOA is in much better shape now. We've implemented new financial controls. We require multiple board approvals for any expenditure over $500, and we've hired an independent accounting firm to audit us quarterly. We're trying to rebuild trust with our residents." Life slowly returned to normal after that. My easement remained clear and accessible. The new HOA board was professional and respectful. A few residents even apologized to me for believing Sharon's lies during the initial controversy. I made some improvements to the easement area, adding gravel to make it smoother and more durable. Richard asked if the HOA could contribute to the cost since the improved road surface would benefit both properties, and I agreed. It was the kind of cooperative, reasonable interaction that should have happened from the beginning. My back acreage thrived with regular access restored. My orchard produced a good harvest that fall. I was able to maintain my equipment properly and even expanded my workshop. The whole property felt more secure knowing I could access all of it easily. One evening in September, I was sitting on my back porch watching the sunset over the desert when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. "Mr. Owens." "This is Jennifer Kim from the Nevada Property Rights Coalition. I've been following your story, and I wanted to thank you. Your case has become something of a landmark in HOA property disputes. Several other homeowners have successfully challenged HOA overreach by citing your case as precedent." "That's good to hear," I said. "Would you be willing to speak at our annual conference? We'd love to have you share your experience and the lessons learned about protecting property rights." I thought about it. Public speaking wasn't really my thing, but if my experience could help other people stand up to HOA abuse, it seemed worth doing. "Sure, I can do that." I spoke at the conference in November. There were about 200 attendees, mostly homeowners dealing with various HOA disputes. I told my story, emphasized the importance of documentation, and encouraged people to know their rights and stand up for them when necessary. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of people came up to me afterward to share their own HOA horror stories and thank me for speaking out. Several mentioned they'd been inspired by my video to fight back against unreasonable HOA demands. One elderly couple particularly stood out. They explained their HOA had been trying to force them to remove a garden that had been on their property for 30 years, claiming it violated some new aesthetic guidelines. After watching my video, they'd researched their property rights, discovered their garden was protected by a grandfather clause in the HOA covenant, and successfully fought the removal order. "Your video gave us the courage to stand up for ourselves," the wife said, tears in her eyes. "We thought we'd have to destroy my mother's garden. Thank you. Those moments made everything worthwhile." The stress of the initial conflict, the legal fees, the time spent dealing with Sharon's harassment, all of it was worth it if it helped others understand they had rights and the power to defend them. The following spring, Richard Chen contacted me with an interesting proposal. "Zach, the HOA wants to create an informational easement along your access route. Nothing that would impede your use, just some landscaping and maybe a small sign explaining the shared use arrangement. We think it could be educational for residents to understand how easements work. Would you be open to that?" It was a reasonable request, and showed how much the relationship between me and the HOA had improved. We worked together to design a small informational plaque that explained easements, property rights, and cooperative land use. The HOA paid for the landscaping and the sign, and I approved the design. The plaque read, "This access route is a recorded easement, demonstrating how property rights can be shared for mutual benefit. Easements are legal rights that must be respected by all parties. This easement allows neighboring property access while crossing HOA land, and is an example of proper land use planning." It was educational and diplomatic, turning what had been a source of conflict into a teaching moment. In June of 2026, almost exactly a year after the gate incident, I was working in my back workshop when I heard a vehicle coming through the easement. I walked outside to see Richard Chen pulling up in a golf cart. "Hope I'm not intruding," he said. "Just wanted to check in and see how things are going." "All good. What brings you out here?" "Honestly, I wanted to personally apologize again for what happened last year. I was on the board when Sharon pushed through that gate installation, and I should have asked more questions. I should have verified property boundaries. I failed in my responsibility and you paid the price. Richard, you've already apologized multiple times, and you've made real changes to prevent it from happening again. That's what matters. I appreciate that. But I also wanted you to know that your case taught me something important about leadership. It's not enough to go along with what seems convenient or what a strong personality pushes for. Real leadership means doing the homework, asking the tough questions, and standing up for what's right even when it's difficult." We talked for a while longer. Richard shared that the HOA was doing well under new management. Finances were transparent, resident satisfaction was up, and the community had learned valuable lessons about governance and accountability. As he was leaving, Richard turned back. "You know, some people still think you were wrong to tear down that gate yourself. They say you should have waited for the legal process. What do you think?" He smiled. "I think sometimes doing the right thing means standing up for yourself, even when it's uncomfortable or risky. You knew your rights, you tried the diplomatic route, and when that failed, you took action." I respect that. After he left, I thought about everything that had happened. A year ago, I'd been standing in my driveway at 6:30 in the morning, shocked to discover an illegal gate blocking my property access. In the moment, I'd had to make a choice: accept the violation of my rights and go through a lengthy legal process, or take direct action to remove the obstruction. I'd chosen action, and while it had been stressful and risky, it had been the right choice. The legal route would have taken months or years. The HOA would have continued operating with poor oversight. Sharon's corruption might never have been discovered. Sometimes standing up for your rights creates ripples that go far beyond your immediate situation. My property was thriving. The easement was clear and well maintained. I'd made friends in the HOA community who respected the boundaries and understood the importance of property rights. And I'd learned that documentation, knowledge of the law, and the courage to stand up for yourself were powerful tools. The story could have ended badly. I could have faced criminal charges if I'd been wrong about my easement or if I'd damaged property beyond what was necessary. But I'd done my homework, documented everything, and acted within my rights. That preparation had made all the difference. On a warm evening in late summer, I was irrigating my orchard when I noticed someone walking through the easement. It was a young couple I'd seen around the HOA neighborhood. "Hi there," the woman called out. "Are you Mr. Owens?" "That's me. We just wanted to say thank you. We read about what happened with the gate and Sharon Mitchell. We're new homeowners, and your story taught us to actually read and understand all the documents before we bought our house. We found out our property has an easement too, and now we know to protect it." "That's great," I said. "Knowledge is power when it comes to property rights." "Also," the young man added, "we're on the HOA board now. Well, we joined after Sharon was arrested. We wanted to help make sure nothing like that happens again. Your case was a real wake-up call for the community." We chatted for a few more minutes. They were enthusiastic and idealistic, genuinely wanting to make their community better. It was encouraging to see the next generation stepping up with the right intentions. As they walked back toward their home, I returned to my irrigation work. The sun was setting, painting the desert sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Water flowed through the lines, feeding the trees I'd planted years ago. Everything was as it should be. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Just FYI, Sharon's restitution payment started this month. HOA received the first installment. Justice system works slowly, but it works." I smiled and pocketed my phone. The whole situation had taught me that standing up for what's right isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. Property rights matter. Legal easements matter. Documentation matters. And sometimes, when someone tries to take away your rights, you have to be willing to fight back. The gate incident had started as a violation of my property rights and ended with a corrupt HOA president in prison, a community reformed, and a precedent set for defending easement rights. It had been a wild ride, but I'd do it all again if I had to. As I finished the irrigation and locked up my workshop, I took one last look at the easement route. It was clear, well-maintained, and properly marked. No gates, no obstructions, just a simple access road connecting two parts of my property as it had always been meant to. I drove my truck through the easement toward my house, grateful for the access I'd fought to preserve, satisfied that justice had been served, and confident that the story of the illegal gate would continue to help others stand up for their property rights for years to come. The Nevada sun had fully set by the time I reached my house. I parked the truck, grabbed my tools, and headed inside. Tomorrow would bring new projects and new challenges, but tonight I could rest knowing my property was secure, my rights were protected, and my decision to remove that illegal gate had been completely justified. Sometimes you have to take a stand. Sometimes you have to document everything and prepare for a fight. And sometimes, when the law is clearly on your side, you have to be willing to act even when it's uncomfortable or risky. That morning in June, when I picked up those tools and started removing that gate, I was doing more than clearing an obstruction. I was defending a principle that matters to every property owner, the right to access your own land. And in the end, that principle had won.